Today's shiur begins 7 lines from the top of Daf Nun Zayin. Let us point out that from this point till the Mishnah, the Gemara will be dealing with one topic. We will be focusing on the machlokes tanoim between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi regarding a woman's agreement to receive less than the formal ksuba requirement. If we speak about a basula, so we know she gets 200 zuz. We saw an arrangement whereby she can write a receipt or say to her husband that I consider it as if I received already 100. And he's then obligated to a ksuba of merely 100 for the basula wife. We have a highly structured piece of Gemara, and we will also be providing some tables in order to follow the different opinions that we see in the Gemara. A Gemara like this is characterized by many, many names. For some, that presents a great difficulty because for every name and possibility that accounts for an additional variable. So we're going to have to bear in mind numerous names and situations, and in order to assist in that effort, we're going to also rely on the charts that we have in the margins of our Gemara. In addition to the charts, we also have geometric shapes, and in order to appreciate those, we glance at the side of the Gemara where we have our nosei mivneh heading. The nosei is the topic heading, the mivneh structural note, which we've combined into one. So we have diamonds, and you'll notice that the diamonds highlight ki also ravdimi, and later ki also ravin, that you can see on the 5th wide line of the Gemara. These are l'shoinus ravdimi v'ravin she'mevi'im divrei Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi v'Rabbi Yochanan. Each one, Rav Dimi and Ravin, will present Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan b'kesher l'machlokes hatanoim Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbi Yehuda. Regarding that machlokes, be'im isha yechoylo limchol al chelik miksubasa afilu al peh oy dafka b'ksav. Can a woman forego a part of her ksuba orally, or only if she writes a formal receipt? You'll notice that just in this simple presentation, we have 6 names. That is Rav Dimi and Ravin, who then present Rabbi Yeshua ben. Each one presents Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, who in turn refer to the machlokes tanoim Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. The crown shape that you see highlights the word machlokes. That highlights where, under what circumstances there is a machlokes, and that's a reference to the machlokes tanoim between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, and under what circumstances is there no machlokes. You'll see a bow tie shape used to highlight the name Rabbi Avo. And you'll see that in each presentation, Rabbi Avo, who, by the way, we didn't mention his name amongst the 6 names, but we're going to be introducing later in the Gemara Rabbi Avo, and then a comment made by Rav Papa on that which Rabbi Avo said. So we're suggesting there are quite a few different names in this piece of Gemara. We're also going to be seeing expressions that refer to, you'll see tchila and sof, the beginning of something and the end of something. Those somethings are chuppah and bia. Chuppah is the entrance of the couple under a marriage canopy, and bia is the act of intimacy that follows their nisuin, namely that follows the ritual, if you will, or the practice of going under the marriage canopy. we're going to be focusing on these points in time, Tchila and Sof of each one, and let us emphasize that at a certain point in this discussion, you will notice that two phrases that represent times are actually overlapping. In other words, when we refer to the end of the chuppah, that is the same as the beginning of biyah. Biyah being that act of intimacy. So we have these different time frames, and the possibility of an oral foregoing or forfeiting of part of the ksubah, that is it's a greater possibility if it takes place, we'll say, early on as things progress. But once the couple gets more and more as closer or more intimate with one another, then the only way that we would say that she can, let's say, forfeit a part of the ksubah, then we would insist on something written. But the earlier in the scheme of things, that increases, we'll say, the possibility of an oral forfeiting, an oral foregoing of part of the ksubah that we've been discussing. So far, our hope is that we're making some sense, but it could be somewhat abstract still for some listeners. As we go on in the Gemara, maybe what we'll do is we'll take a look at chart number 1. This chart, we're going to say, is the Rabbi Avo approach to things. You'll notice the chart on the left-hand side of your Gemara page, pretty much like opposite halfway down the Gemara text. You can see a chart and a Roman numeral number 1. On this chart, under that heading Tavla is a table, Roman numeral number 1, Be'inyan Machlokes Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Hamuva, on the Machlokes we saw on Daf Nun Vav Amid Beis, and we note in the upper right-hand corner of this chart, of this table, this is according to Rabbi Avo. Now, reading across the top of the chart, we have the different time, the points in time. Tchilas chuppah, that's as the couple enters the marriage canopy. Then there's a time called Sof chuppah, which overlaps, which is the same as Tchilas biyah. And then there's Sof biyah. That's after the couple has completed their intimacy. The issue is, can a woman forego the ksubah forego part of the ksubah without her actually writing a receipt? Now, the opinion that is associated with the writing of the receipt, this is we saw this in the Mishnah, we'll say, associated with Rabbi Yehuda. The idea of al peh, that will associate with Rabbi Yossi. The issue that we continue to deal with is under what circumstances do they, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, argue? So if we continue now reading our chart, or the table, you'll see, going down the right-hand side, you see Rav Dimi, and then you have Rabbi Shua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. And then later down on the chart, you see Ravin and his presentation of Rabbi Shua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. So now, reading Rav Dimi's presentation of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, he will tell you that the Machlokes Tanoim exists at Tchilas Chuppah. In other words, at that point, at Tchilas Chuppah, it's then that Rabbi Yossi will accept an oral forfeiting on the woman's part. But only then. If you reach something called Sof Biyah, if you read that chart on Rav Dimi's version of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, you'll see that when you reach Sof Biyah, then everyone is in agreement that the woman is not mocheles. Rabbi Avo in our Gemara will be telling us that what appeared when you read the Gemara text as a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shua ben Levi, it's not a machlokes. Rabbi Avo claims that Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shua ben Levi are not arguing with one another. So if we continue reading on our chart, Rabbi Yochanan says that Tchilas Chuppah, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that's when you'll have a machlokes tanoim. What about Sof Chuppah, which is Tchilas Biyah? So Rabbi Yochanan says there's a machlokes then too. That's not at odds with anything that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said. Simply put, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi didn't even address that time period, according to Rabbi Avo's presentation. And as far as Rabbi Yochanan and Sof Biyah, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't comment on Sof Biyah. He's in agreement with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that Sof Biyah, everyone agrees, there's no mocheles alpeh, there's no oral forfeiting. When we continue on the chart, we then see Ravin's presentation of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. One thing that we must note is that according to Rabbi Avo's approach, Ravin and Rav Dimi have a point of disagreement. And you can see it immediately. For example, Ravin's version of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi claims that at Tchilas Chuppah, Divrei al Kol Mocheles, everyone, that means even Rabbi Yehuda will agree, the woman can forfeit the part of her ksuba orally. What did Rav Dimi's version of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi claim on that? He said that is some machlokes. Ravin's version of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says everyone is in agreement that she's mocheles. In fact, if you do a survey of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, of Ravin's different possibilities of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, you'll notice that under Ravin there is no point at which any of them claim that everyone will agree that Eino Mocheles. Therefore, according to Ravin, it comes out, Ravin's version of Rabbi Yossi is that she will always be able to verbally forfeit a part of her ksuba. No need for writing, according to Ravin's version of Rabbi Yossi, as Ravin presents Rabbi Shua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. So, if we continue reading our chart, Ravin says that according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, at the point of Tchilas Chuppah, everyone agrees the Isha, the woman, is mocheles. She can do the oral forfeiting. When you reach the Sof Chuppah, which is Tchilas Biyah, at that point, you will find a machlokes tanoim. And it's at that point that Rabbi Yehuda says it's too far into the relationship that an oral forfeiting would be enough. She would have to write it out. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, as Rabbi Avo presents things, once again, when we read the Gemara, it will appear as if Rabbi Yochanan is arguing on Rabbi Shua ben Levi, but Rabbi Avo says no, that Rabbi Yochanan is not arguing on him, and all that Rabbi Yochanan means to say is that at Sof Chuppah, which is Tchilas Biyah, there is a machlokes. Well, that's what Rabbi Shua ben Levi said also. And as far as Sof Biyah is concerned, Rabbi Yochanan says that too is a point of machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan, as far as Rabbi Avo is concerned, doesn't really discuss the issue of Tchilas Chuppah. So that after all is said and done, you will see, both according to Rav Dimi and according to Ravin, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan are not arguing with one another. As far as Rav Dimi and Ravin is concerned, they are arguing with one another. And you can see that just by looking at the chart. When you look at Rav Dimi and Tchilas Biyah, he claims that's a machlokes. When you look at Ravin and Tchilas Chuppah, he claims that according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, everyone will agree she could be Mocheles. Rav Dimi's version of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi had not so, not Divrei Kol Machas, rather Machlokes. Now, as we turn to the Gemara text itself, we pick up the Gemara 7 lines from the top. Ki also Rav Dimi, Omar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Omar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Mishum Bar Kapara. The Gemara itself has quite a few more names than we presented, but it's a standard situation of a string of names, and the same, say, sequence of names you will see later when Ravin introduces these shitas as well. So we've chosen specific names in presenting the sugya. So Rabbi Yehoshua, according to Rav Dimi and his presentation of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Machlokes, the word Machlokes is a reference to the Machlokes Tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, Betchila. And at this point we're not going to explain that which we already did explain by looking at the tables, at the first table, Roman numeral number 1, but at this point we have to play along and just take the word at face value. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi claims that there's a Machlokes Tanoim Betchila. Aval Basof, again this word Basof, vague, it means at the end. L'divrei hakol, all will agree, Eina Mocheles. There's no longer any possibility of an oral forfeiting. The forfeiting on the part of the woman takes place only if she writes out a receipt. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Bein Bezu Machlokes. And if you look at this like superficially, he says whether it's Betchila or Basof, there is a Machlokes. So as at first glance, it would appear that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan are arguing. According to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, there's a Machlokes at the beginning, but not Basof. So if you were to focus on that time period called Sof, according to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, everyone agrees not Mocheles, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, there still is a Machlokes. Now, we're not wasting our time by presenting this, because what we just said, namely we'll call it the superficial looking at things, that present Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi as arguing with Rabbi Yochanan, that approach, in fact, is the approach that Rav Papa, who appears later in the sugya, is the approach he prefers to take. And we can tell you ahead of time that Rav Papa would prefer having Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan arguing rather than have Rav Dimi and Ravin arguing. Let's continue in the Gemara. Omar Rabbi Avol. Rabbi Yochanan. It was told to me by Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan was one of the 2 opinions we just saw. Rabbi Yochanan told me, says Rabbi Avol, Di'anov Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi lo palagino nahadodi, that I, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, are not arguing with one another. Now, that we know to say that Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi are not arguing with one another, that's thanks to Rabbi Avol. Later in the Gemara, Rav Papa will say, if not for Rabbi Avol's comment, if not for his report on that which he received from Rabbi Yochanan, if we had just Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, I, says Rav Papa, wouldn't agree with what we're about to hear. But look, if Rabbi Avol said it, he said it. We're not going to argue on Rabbi Avol's report. So, what did Rabbi Avol say? He says, well, I was told by Rabbi Yochanan Danov Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi lo pelgin adodi, that we're not arguing with one another. My betchila dekama Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi made reference, according to Rav Dimi, of at tchila there is a machlokes. What did he mean, betchila? There is a machlokes. Answer tchilas chuppah. At the very beginning of the Nisuin process, at the beginning of the chuppah, then we have the machlokes tanoim. Between Rabbi Yossi, oral forfeiting is enough, and Rabbi Yehuda say, no, it's too late for that. Umay soif, and what does sof of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi mean, in which he says everyone agrees, not mocheles. Everyone, meaning even Rabbi Yehuda, who was even Rabbi Yossi, who was in favor of the oral forfeiting, even Rabbi Yossi agrees ain't a mocheles. You know what sof means? Sof biyah. It's very late. It's the end of the biyah time. So there are basically two time extremes that are referred to by Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Betchila meaning tchilas chuppah, and sof is sof biyah. At those two those are the time periods Rabbi Shua ben Levi addressed, the two extremities, we'll say. And when I said whether it's this or that, there is a machlokes. In other words, when Rabbi Yochanan said what I did, making no reference to any divrei hakol situation, well, I'll tell you, tchilas chuppah, the sof chuppah, tehi tchilas biyah. I was referring to tchilas biyah, and when I spoke about sof, I said, remember, Rabbi Yochanan said, bein bezu, whether it's betchila or basof. But what did the tchila and sof of Rabbi Yochanan mean? So the tchila of Rabbi Yochanan meant tchilas chuppah. There's a machlokes. What did Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi say about tchilas chuppah? Also machlokes. What does sof mean according to Rabbi Yochanan? Sof chuppah, not sof biyah. Sof chuppah. It's an earlier time period, which is synonymous with tchilas biyah. At that point, there still is a machlokes, and we add the ikr, we add the main point. But sof biyah, Rabbi Yochanan concedes. Everyone will agree, eino mocheles, just like Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. So this point that there's no argument between Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, this is something that we learned from Rabbi Avol. And all of this was presented by Rav Dimi. So that the result is that when you're according to Rav Dimi, when you're at the tchilas chuppah, everyone agrees there's a machlokes. Ki also Ravin Omar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Omar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Mishum Bar Kapor. All the names are the same as we saw when Rav Dimi presented his case, and therefore we're just focusing on chosen names. Rovin's version of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Machloikis lebesof, Avol betchila, divrei hakol mocheles. If you will, Rovin's approach is a more lenient approach, whereby we mean, what we mean to say lenient is that there's an easy, a woman can more easily forfeit under Rovin's circumstances. Namely, that you have a tchila situation where all Tanoim would agree she can orally forfeit. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's Shita, according to Ravin, is that there's a machlokes besof, but betchila everyone agrees mocheles. Rabbi Yochanan bein bezu machlokes. Whether it's betchila or basof, there is a machlokes. So when you look at things again at first glance, he's saying there's always a machlokes, even betchila. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said that betchila everyone agrees. There's no machlokes. The same as we saw above. I was told by Rabbi Yochanan that I and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi are not arguing with one another. My libesof yom Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said that besof there is a machlokes. What time period is that? Sof chuppah. And we wrote in our marked Gemaras, our Shas Ozer, we wrote sof chuppah is the same as tchilas biyah. Umay tchila. And what is tchila of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, where he said everyone agrees mocheles? That's tchilas chuppah. That's at the very beginning of the chuppah. And when I said that whether it's tchila or sof, there's a machlokes, I was referring to tchilas biyah, v'sof biyah. Tchilas biyah is the same as sof chuppah. What did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say about Sof Chuppah? He said that at that point there's a machlokes. What does Rabbi Yochanan say about Sof Chuppah? There's a machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan says that Sof Biyah is also a point in time in which there's a machlokes. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi didn't address that time period. Sof Biyah. So that having been said, there's no machlokes according to Ravin's presentation of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. There's no machlokes between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. We saw when we presented the sugya on the chart that between Rav Dimi and Ravin there is a machlokes. What's the difference between those opinions? According to Rav Dimi, Tchilas Chuppah, you'll find that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi claims it's a machlokes. According to Ravin's version, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, at Tchilas Chuppah, everyone agrees mocheles. So you have essentially according to this approach, we'll call it the Rabbi Avo approach, we have a machlokes between Rav Dimi and Ravin as to what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi had said. Now, I want to say something that is based on the continuation of the Gemara, and especially that which you see in Rashi. It might sound a little harsh, but when you look at this approach, we'll call it the Rabbi Avo approach, Rav Dimi and Ravin cannot both be right. In other words, each one, Rav Dimi and Ravin, are presenting what did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say. One is telling the truth, and one is not. That having been said, that's Rabbi Avo's approach to things. We have machlokesim in terms of, let's say, that type of machlokes. You can say black or white. It's one is telling the truth and one is not. The other type of machlokesim, which have to do with, we'll say, subjective matters. What needs to be emphasized, what needs to be de-emphasized. Those are machlokesim, but they are, would have to say, they're not black and white, but rather they are machlokesim that reflect, we'll say, subjective interpretation. But according to the way we've seen things up till now, through the eyes of Rabbi Avo, Rav Dimi and Ravin are arguing with one another as to what did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say. It's either this way or that way. They can't both be correct. Now, let's continue in the Gemara, and maybe before we do so, let us take a look at chart number 2. This chart presents the opinions of Rabbi Shimon Levi and Rabbi Yochanan through the eyes of Rav Papa. Rav Papa enters the picture by saying, listen, if we didn't have Rabbi Avo claiming that Rabbi Yochanan told him that he and Rabbi Shimon Levi don't argue with one another, I would have said that Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi are arguing with one another, and that Rav Dimi and Ravin are not arguing with one another. Let's take a look at things through the chart or the table that we have on the opposite margin. You'll find on the right-hand side of your marked Gemara, about halfway down, the Tavla, Roman numeral number 2, we call it Rav Papa. Rav Dimi will tell us that there's a machlokes betchilas biyah, which is Dahainu Sof Chuppah. And Ravin will tell us that there is a machlokes besof Chuppah, which is betchilas biyah. Essentially the same thing. Now, Rav Dimi has his version of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, and Ravin has his version of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. So when you're looking at the chart, let's take a look at Rav Dimi's version of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. His version of Shmuel ben Levi says that at Tchilas Chuppah, he doesn't address that. Sof Chuppah, which is the same as Tchilas Biyah, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says that there's a machlokes tanoim. At Sof Biyah, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi tells us that everyone agrees Eino Mocheles. It's too late. She can't be Mocheles. Rabbi Yochanan, he tells us that at the Sof Chuppah Tchilas Biyah, there is a machlokes. That is the same as Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. However, Rabbi Yochanan says that when it comes to Sof Biyah, there is still a machlokes. As opposed to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he said that at that point, it's too late. Everyone would agree she's not mocheles. Rabbi Yochanan feels that even though it's so late in the game, Rabbi Yossi will still say that an oral forfeiting is possible. Now we look at Roven's version of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. He says that at Tchilas Chuppah, everyone agrees she could be mocheles. Do you see that Rav Dimi's version of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi on Tchilas Chuppah, he didn't even address that. So we can't say that Rav Dimi and Roven are arguing about what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said. He's simply as far as Rav Dimi is concerned, we don't have any record as to what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said about that time period. And thanks to Roven, so we know that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi at that point in time said everyone agrees she could be mocheles. Rabbi Yochanan, actually, as far as Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is concerned, when you get to Sof Chuppah Tchilas Biyah, at that point there would be a machlokes. When you look at Rabbi Yochanan, at Tchilas Chuppah, there is a machlokes. Not that everyone agrees. You can see that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan would be arguing. According to Rav Dimi, if you just back up a bit, when you look at the Sof Biyah situation, there too you see Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan arguing. As far as Roven's version, Rabbi Yochanan concerning the Sof Chuppah, that time period is a machlokes. That's what you can see on the chart. So that what you come away with from Rav Papa is that Rav Dimi and Roven are not arguing with one another as far as what the earlier Amoroim had said. So that as far as Rav Dimi and Roven are concerned, they are both correct. In other words, Rav Dimi and Roven do not present a conflict with regard to what each particular Amora had said. In other words, Rav Dimi's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi can coexist with Roven's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So they're not arguing as to what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said. Likewise, Rav Dimi and Roven are not arguing as to what Rabbi Yochanan had said. So now the Gemara. Omar Rav Papa. Ilav di Omar Rabbi Avo, if Rabbi Avo had not said the following. Follows a quote, it's a line in a word. L'didim of Shlominei Rabbi Yochanan. I was told by Rabbi Yochanan, Danov Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, lo palginon adoti, that we are not arguing with one another. Had that not existed, namely that comment of Rabbi Avo, so Rav Papa says, Hava Amino, I would have thought that Rabbi Yochanan, for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, pligi, Rav Dimi v'Roven, lo pligi. My sof de ka'omar Roven, when Roven spoke about a machlokes besof, what was the sof that Roven was referring to? Sof chuppah. Umay tchila de ka'omar Rav Dimi, Rav Dimi had said that at the Tchila there was a machlokes. Just like Ravin said that at Sof there was a machlokes, Rav Dimi had said B'Tchila there's a machlokes. And what does Tchila of Rav Dimi mean where there is a machlokes? Tchilas Biyah. Tchilas Biyah is the same as Sof Chuppah. So it comes out that Ravin, who said Sof, that concerning which there's a machlokes, and Rav Dimi, who spoke about Tchila, concerning which there is a machlokes, they're basically talking about the same time period. And what is that? It's Sof Chuppah. My Komash Molon. Here the Gemara is asking a very, very basic kind of question, and that is, what is Rav Papa's agenda over here by telling us if Rabbi Avo had not said what he did, but he did say it. He said it. And Rav Papa recognizes it. He's not denying that it was said. What message is Rav Papa trying to communicate to us by telling us had Rabbi Avo not said what he did? The Gemara answers, Ha Komash Malon. The following is what he wants us to understand. It's a lesson that is beyond this particular sugya per se, because this sugya per se has been dictated to us by Rabbi Avo. But in general, if you have a situation where there are, let's say, deos that appear to be arguing with one another, and you have to struggle in how to understand or formulate the machlokes, and you have, let's say, you have two options. The following is what Reb Papa wants us to understand. The pligi trei amoroi ataimo dinafshayu. It would be, let's say, preferable to have, like in this case, Reb Shua ben Levi and Reb Yochanan arguing about something that we'll call it conceptual. V'lo pligi trei amoroi alibo dechad amora. Rather than have two Amoroim like Rav Dimi and Ravin arguing as to what one Amora had said, as for example, as having Rav Dimi and Ravin arguing as to what did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say, because in that case one is lying. I think, as you'll see if you look in the Rashi, he uses a very harsh language. They cannot both be right. So that if we take a look together in the Rashi, we're looking at Rashi together in the wide lines, the sixth of the wide lines under the Gemara text. Hokamash Mulon. Tehechod Ashkan Amoroi de Pligi Adodi. Where you find Amoraim arguing with one another, Kol Chad Aliba Denafshe. Each one presenting his own opinion of matters. Utrei Amoroi Achrini de Pligi Beplukta Dahana Amoroi. And two other Amoraim who are arguing concerning this earlier Machlokas Amoraim. Vislan Lefrushi Milsa Betrei Lishni. And there stand in front of you two paths in which to analyze the later Amoraim vis-a-vis the earlier Amoraim. Chadominayu, one approach is Miflag Trei Amoroi Alibo Denafshayu, that you have two Amoraim, using our examples, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shua ben Levi, have their own, let's say, conceptual machlokas. Shekol echad omer svora shelo. Each one says his own interpretation. Kagon Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Those are the Rabbi Yochanan is giving his interpretation of the machlokas tanoim, and Rabbi Shua ben Levi is giving his interpretation of the machlokas tanoim. V'inoch trei amoroi alibo dechad lo miflagi, and the later two Amoraim, Rav Dimi and Ravin, when you take those two and focus them on one of the earlier opinions, lo miflagi, they're not arguing with one another. Elo amri chada milsa, namely Ravin and Rav Dimi agree as to what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi had said. V'chadomin lishna, another approach to this situation, mifligi trei amoroi alibo dechad, that the two later Amoraim, Rav Dimi and Ravin, are themselves arguing within one of the earlier Amoraim. Kagom Rav Dimi Ravin, umashvi milsa de trei amoroi kamoi chada milsa. And they, Rav Dimi and Ravin, had made the earlier opinions, namely the opinions of Rav Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, as they are not arguing. Those are your two approaches. Shavkino nahi lishna, we would abandon, leave aside, reject the second approach, the mifilgi trei amorei liba dechad, where you would have Rav Dimi and Ravin arguing as to what did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say. V'naktinon hahi, and rather take the first approach, the mifilgi trei amorei aliba denafshayo, where Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi are arguing between themselves. You have Rabbi Yochanan's presentation of the Machlokes Tanoim, and you have Rabbi Shimon Levi's presentation of the Machlokes Tanoim. The Chipliki Trei Aliba Dechad, when you have a situation where, like we saw Rabbi Avo's approach, which said that Rav Dimi and Ravin argued as to what did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say. Mar Omar Hochi Omar Ploni, Umar Omar Hochi Omar Ploni. Each one says, thusly said Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Chad Minayu Mishakir. Here we see Rashi uses that one of them is lying. Avoki Pligi Treamoroi Bedino Biser Veheter. However, when you find two Amoraim arguing over a law or a din, generally speaking, covers monetary matters or matters of Isur Veheter, matters of religious concern. Kolchad Omar Hochi Mistaber Taima. Each one is saying it appears more likely this way, and the other one is saying it appears more likely that way. Ein kan sheker. You don't have an issue of a lie. Kolchad v'chad svora didei ko'omar. Each one is saying his own take on things. Mar yoiv taimo le'teru, mar yoiv taimo le'isura. One gives reasons for being more lenient, the other one gives more reasons for being more restrictive. Mar medami milsa lahachi, mar medami le'binyan achrina. Each one compares the matter at hand to something else. V'iko le'meimar, and at the end of the day you can say eilu v'eilu divrei elikim chayim heim. Both have truth to them. Sometimes this reason is more applicable and sometimes that reason is more applicable. As life goes on and time goes on, reasons change according to different changes in other circumstances. So, just to summarize, we have Rabbi Avo in his actual presentation of Ravin and Rav Dimi, and you have Rav Papa's take on things, which differs from theoretically differs from the approach that Rabbi Avo had suggested here. I say theoretically because in actuality Rav Papa is not denying what Rabbi Avo said, but if in another case, given a choice of these two paths, you can see that Rav Papa would have chosen a different path of analysis. We now turn back to the Gemara. We have a new Mishnah. Noisle besula shnei mosur chodesh mishetova haba lefarnes es atzmo. Ukeshem shenoislim leisha kach noislim leish lefarnes es atzmo. We give the basula, the girl, 12 months from the point at which the husband, the Oros, asks to enter Nisuin. So from the point that he's Toveh, he requests from her, he instructs her, let us approach Nisuin. From that point, 12 months are given for her to Lefarnes es atzma, to get her needs together. This includes, Rashi speaks about the tachshitin, different jewelry and cosmetics that a woman needs. And just like we give for the woman that amount of time, we also realize that the man needs time as well to get the funds needed for the meal and other tzorchei chuppah matters. That's 12 months that we give to the Basula. The Rashi on the Mishnah says, no, so Basula zman liknisasa l'chuppah miyom shetova ba'al le'achar shikitsha lahazhira al iskei chuppah lahachin tachshita, to inform her, to warn her regarding chuppah matters, and to get her other needs, or tachshitim, in order. The Mishnah goes on, Ulalmona shloishim yom. The woman who is getting married for a second time, she was getting married as a widow, we give her 30 days with regard to the time between the what they'll call the first stage and the second stage of her marriage. Higia zman v'lo nisu, oichlos mishalo v'ochlos betruma. When 12 months have gone by in the case of the Basula, or 30 days in the case of Almona, and they didn't consummate their marriage with Nisuin, so the women at that point are entitled to be supported by the husbands. And if the husband is a Kohen, she's entitled at that point to eat Truma. As the Mishnah goes on, it deals with the case of a man who is a Kohen. The husband is a Kohen, and the time has come. So what exactly does he give her? Rabbi Tarfon Omer noisten lo hakol Truma. She's given exclusively Truma. No Chulin and Truma, but just Truma. Now, there's a problem, and Rashi alludes to it. A woman, when she's Tmeya, and a woman, assuming the woman's a regular, standard type of woman, on a monthly basis, a couple weeks out of the month, she experiences impurity, defilement. The female menstrual flow imposes a state on her called nida, at which point she's Tmeya and she cannot eat Truma. Truma demands a person be in a state of ritual purity, tahara. So, if she's going to receive only Truma, what is she going to do during her Tmeya days? She's going to sell the Truma. Truma, by the way, is sold only to Kohanim, and hence the market value is less because it has a less public appeal. She'll sell it when her Tuma days come, or in anticipation of her Tuma days, and she'll buy Chulin. Rabbi Akiva Omer, regarding the same issue as to what the Kohen husband provides for her, Mechza Chulin u'Mechza Truma. Half Chulin for her Tomei days and half Truma for her Torah days. Hayavam eino machil b'Truma. The husband that a woman was married to was a Kohen. He died. They had no children. He has a surviving brother. So she's a Yavama, and she's waiting for the Yavam to have intimacy with her. Well, during that waiting time, he's not machil b'Truma. He does not entitle her to eat Truma. She might very well have eaten Truma while she was married to her husband, the Kohen, but once he dies and she's waiting for a Yavam, the Yavam does not entitle her to eat from Truma. And now the Mishnah goes on with different amounts of time. Asa shisha chadoshim b'fnei abal v'shisha chadoshim b'fnei Yavam. Let us say of those 12 months, during which time she was not going to be eating Truma anyway. 6 months the husband was still alive. He died 6 months into the time period, and the balance of the 6 months to complete the year was in front of she was waiting for the Yavam. we should look together at the Rashi. At the Rashi, that about 3-4 lines from the bottom. Also, Shisha Chadoshim B'fnei Abal Mehanoch Shnei Mosar Chodesh Hakvuim Lo Mishatov Abal. 6 months of the 12 months from the time that the husband had sought her out to enter Nisuin. We'll see this in the progression of the Mishnah, where for 11 months and 28 days the husband was still alive. And he died, and then there was just one more day of the 12-month period that she was waiting for the Yavam. As sof kol sof means that at the end of the day the husband never became obligated to support her. And this is a significant point that Rashi is adding. He's adding that the same would apply if he became obligated in his lifetime. Once he dies, she does not continue eating the truma. The kinyan habal poka, the kinyan of the husband, the bond that she had with the husband, stopped upon his death. However, if all of the time was in the presence of the husband, and he simply tarried and didn't complete the nisuin, there would have been a time period that she would have started eating the truma. However, when he dies, that stops. Of course, we're talking about a case where there are no children. Otherwise, we wouldn't be speaking about a yavam at all. Let's go back to the Mishnah. 3 lines from the bottom, case number 2. Ve'afilu kulon b'fnei habal choser yoim echad b'fnei hayavam. Even if 11 months and 28 days were while the husband was still alive, and the last day, the echad b'fnei hayavam, the 29th day, was the woman was waiting for the yavam. O kulon b'fnei hayavam choser yom echad b'fnei habal, or she had been with the husband only one day of the 12 months. The first day he died, and then there was a yavam. Eina ocheles b'truma. She's not entitled to eat from truma during those 12 months. Zu Mishnah Rishona. Up till now, this is called the Mishnah Rishona, the earlier teaching, which states that when the time comes, when the 12 months passes, she is entitled to eat. She's entitled to eat from the husband's property, the husband's account, the husband's funds. Based in Shalachreim Amru, a later court ruling stated, we continue at the top of Omid Beis, even if 12 months go by, the woman does not eat from truma until she actually enters the marriage canopy. So that, according to the Beis Din Shachrem or the Mishnah Achrona, the idea of a woman starting to eat from the husband's truma before an actual nisuin just does not exist.